Hello, good evening. Welcome to the Graphic Elisava lectures. So today, for the first time, we have like a double program. So we are having Daniel Wenzel, and then we will having Serge Romza from Northern Berlin, Oslo. So we will start by Daniel. We will leave some time for Q&A, and then we will continue automatically with Serge. So there will not be a intermediate part. Okay, so Daniel, I guess that if the room is so full is because you know him quite well. He's a very, very talented young guy. He's in between design, technology, and art, with maybe an emphasis on his work on typography. And also he was named last year, 24, like one of the young guns by the One Club. Is that the organization, right? And also it happens that we are doing this double program today because both of them, they are also running a workshop this week. Daniel with the students in the Master in Visual Design, and Serge with the students in Editorial Design, that will end up by an exhibition that will be ready on Friday. So you are welcome to come back next week and see it. So yeah, I guess that the work of Daniel is pretty well known by the work he has done by himself, but also for other well-known companies. And you see the title of what he is going to talk about today. So please welcome Daniel Wenzel. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me like this? Okay. So this is just to give like a glimpse in, if for everyone who don't know my work or anything, what I'm doing. So my name is Daniel Wenzel. I am from the Black Forest. Maybe if you can hear from the accent. I studied in Constance, that's like at the Swiss border, and I live in New York. So as Mark said, I'm working in typography and generative processes, and I'm somewhat in this intersection of like art, design, and technology. So what I found there for myself is fonts. So for a long time, I've been like doing type design, like typefaces, type design sketches, and like growing this archive that eventually formed a small type foundry called 26A1. And yeah, it's like a focus, like the foundry itself has to focus on experimental, expressive typefaces with like challenging conventions. What I mean by that is doing things like this, like separating the weight of a typeface in like outside and inside, or in top and bottom, or like using like script typeface techniques to like make like a actual usable like graffiti font, like a throw-up typeface. And in order to give a better introduction on like what the topic is, like I'm saying like a procedural typography, I want to start with this quote of Steve Jobs.
There was an article in Scientific American in the early 70s which compared the efficiency of locomotion for various species of things on the planet. And they ranked them. And it turns out the condor won. Condor was the most efficient, and man came in with a rather unimpressive showing about a third of the way down the list. But someone there had the insight to test the efficiency of man riding a bicycle. And man riding a bicycle was twice as good as the condor, all the way off the end of the list. And what it really illustrated was man's ability as a tool maker. We're basically fashioning a 21st century bicycle here, which can amplify an inherent intellectual ability that man has and really take care of a lot of drudgery to free people to do much more creative work.
All right, so we're going to talk about tools. There's this common misconception that, like, if people look at my work, that I'm only doing programming, or like that everything I do is like, yeah, code-based. But that's not really true, because I would almost say that I use any program that I can find, and the reason is, like, if I pick out one of those, like, let's take After Effects, I kind of see it like a hammer. So if I come across a problem, a problem, like, let's say it's a screw, I can take the hammer and try and, like, eventually probably get it into the wall, but it would maybe make more sense to use a different tool, so like a screwdriver. So one big question that I always ask myself if I'm at this point is, like, why would I use a screwdriver if I can also use a drill? And that's when we talk about things like automation and code and all of that. But yeah, in graphic design or type, or in our field in general, I would say it's not that obvious of a choice. What's the right tool, or, like, if there's a right tool. As an example, I once tried to recreate, like, a Rubik's Cube setup, like more exactly like this, like, three-dimensional Rubik's Cube. And in order to do it, the tool that I ended up using was Houdini. So if you're not familiar with Houdini, that's what people use to do this kind of stuff. So it's not really what, like, would first come to mind to create like a Rubik's Cube setup. But it's, like, really helpful. It's a node-based program. You can do something like this process here, like take an object, like slice it into pieces, and separate them by, like, top, bottom, left, right, rotate it, and do it again and again in a loop. So that's how you create the Rubik's Cube. Since I started, like, teaching more, like, at the moment I'm like teaching at Pratt and Cooper in New York, like giving the workshop here right now. But, like, usually my philosophy is, this was 2021 at Elisava. Usually my philosophy is that all tools are accepted. What I mean by that is, this was one of my students from the photo that I just showed, 2021. He used Max MSP, and to this day, I have never opened the program, and I don't think I have to, because that was not really, that's not necessary for me to know, but, like, it was okay for me if he uses the software that he wants to use and follows the procedural thinking, the procedural workflow that we taught in the course. All right, so in a way, he was using the hammer to put in the screw, but I also think that's okay. So I'm doing a lot of, like, misusing tools. What I mean by misusing tools is I would say there's like two different ways of misusing tools. There's, you don't know any better, and you just use what you have, and if it brings you to the result, that's then fine. But then the other way is that some tools are just a lot better in certain things than others, and then you might as well, like, use their advantages. So if I, for example, like, create a motion typeface like this one, it doesn't really make sense to work in glyphs entirely, because glyphs it's a type design program, but it's not made for motion. So this project, it's like it's for a German, like, carpentry studio, and it's inspired by, like, the organic wood rings. So in order to create, like, this, like, organic, like, flowing ring structures, I didn't want to like manually draw those lines. I wanted to generate them, and then creating this like static and animated like motion font where the process somewhat looked like this. Okay, I've been talking a bunch already about like processes. So again, if it's not really about the tool, it's about the process. I called this like procedural typography. The workshop is called procedural type design. I probably repeat myself to like if there's a couple of the students from the course here, and there's things that I've been saying the last few days, so I hope they don't get tired of me repeating that over and over again. But we talk about procedural. If people hear procedural, it's they think of like generative. Generative, I always get this conclusion like generative is computer graphics, or generative has to look a certain way, but that's not true. So generative design is not the same as computer graphics. It's not a look, it's a process. So you can basically do something manual and like drawing the flames, draw each line of the flames by hand, or you can come up with a process that generates the flames. Essentially like talking about like processes, rules, and constraints. So I've worked on this animation like a couple years back, and to this day I'm always getting asked what tools did you use? And I do think that's the wrong question to ask, because if I'm looking at the process, there's a lot of ways how this could happen. I can like start in Cinema, move on to After Effects, and then to like processing, or do it in Drawbot, or all in After Effects. And I really don't think it matters, because it's just like the logic that you come up with, how you break it, how you break up this more complex task into like smaller digestible steps. So it's like this. It's like a step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In a way, I'm not thinking of it like what tools I use. If it's the hammer or the screwdriver, it's more like coming up with the like instructions to like solve the problem. And I do think that can happen both digital or analog. For example, I once made a puzzle, like separating, like here's the process. I separate a 500-piece puzzle into 250 pieces equally, spray one white, spray one black, assemble it, and you have a generative painting. Now, the digital process might not be the same, but you can still break it out up into like smaller digestible pieces. I need to like pixelate some noise, separate the pixels, expand them, replace them with like puzzle pieces, put it back together, and I have like this puzzle, generative puzzle piece. And yeah, in a way, I come from like before I like started studying, I was like doing a lot of drawing. I did a lot of like a lot more manual work than I'm doing now. But I was never like fully satisfied, because like I think if you draw, you're like making the decision that you draw, and then while you draw, you still make decisions. The difference is if you do something like procedural, you make the decisions, you come up with a process, and then you execute blindly. You review the output, change the process, execute again, change the process, execute again. So that iterative process like basically leads to less self-criticism and more of a surprise. In a way, I always give this example that it's like a Kinderüberraschung. You kind of know what's in there, like you somewhat know what you get, but you don't know exactly what you get. That can happen via like chance, as in this example. I can like take a couple of shapes out of this generative puzzle. Let's say I find this like V, the E, and the dragon. And my argument would be that if I look at this E that has been created through this like generative process, it's like way more interesting than an E that I would have like drawn actively manually. It can also happen through complexity. So looking at this example here, like it's not, this is not random at all. It's actually like basically like stacking a lot of like math on top of each other, and then using like filters and shaders, and like it's not random, but it's so complex that like the final output becomes like somewhat unexpected. I also have that when using AI. AI is so complex in itself that like you can train it, you will somewhat arrive at this output, but you don't know exactly where you will arrive. That comes from like AI trying to mimic the human brain or trying to mimic nature, because if you look into like nature, you have kind of the same things happening. Like if I'm lighting something on fire 3 different times, it's always going to look slightly different. There's going to be different wind conditions, different temperature, different like nature in itself is so complex that it's creating like unexpected results. So that happens in like real nature, and sometimes that's why I'm like doing a lot of like trying to use simulations or simulating like fire or like fluids, because there's a lot of like very interesting things to me at least that like you can like find there and discover and create. Are you familiar with this book? I feel like I asked this in my class and they weren't. I think if you aren't, you should look it up. It's a design classic. It's called Designing Programs by Karl Gessner. It's an amazing book. And the reason I show it is it's from 1964. And to bring this year in context, the Apple I came out in 1976. So that was before home computers, before like programming in design and all of that. But we're still talking about like designing programs. What that really means is if I, like in the examples here, like if I'm doing a manual program, I'm way more involved. Like in this case, like this took like 3 weeks to assemble. Terrible if I say like I want to like do this again and create a second version, that would take another 3 weeks to assemble. The difference is if I'm creating like a digital tool, I can like come up with the process once and do something like this. Like what if I switch out the ladder, it still works. What if I do this and I switch out the input and it still works? But like the idea of like designing programs and designing systems happens like all over my design process, because like looking at like type design in general, it's always a program, it's always a system. Like letters relate to each other. Like you're not just designing all the letters individually, you design the whole system, the whole typeface all at once. Like the N relates to the, I mean, this is basically this like tree, like you design the diagonal shapes, influencing the diagonal shapes, the horizontal, the round ones. Everything is related and nothing is like fully alone standing. That can be seen here. Like this is like the like form analogies as a like analysis. If you look at like brush strokes, all of that in a way you can like simulate. So if I want to like generate a skeleton, simulate a brush, add components, like add the serifs as components and interpolate between all of that. So all of that, even though like type design is often not seen in that territory, I see type design very much as like designing systems, designing programs. And that's the case with like more traditional typefaces, but that's also the case with like more expressive ones. Here you also see like form analogies, like especially in the mono space, is like very, very obvious, like how the T and the I and the L, like all these letters relate to each other. And it's not like one letter that's designed on its own in the middle of this like group of other letters. And in looking at like the work in the studio, I kind of like try to always like put this as a philosophy on top. So if I'm creating like a typeface family, like this one, I also want to like think of it in a systematic approach. Like this is a rule-based logic. You like either rounding the outside, the inside, or the tips. And then you're creating like these all these styles that basically that all just come that all just arrive from this like clear logic that has been established, this like clear like system in place. All right. So now we talked about systems. We talked about processes. And if the tools don't matter so much and the process matters, you still need to like arrive at a solution. You still need to like execute it somehow, right? So even if it doesn't matter, you still need to like know some tools and acquire some skills. And the way I want to like look at this is kind of like I'm trying to like gather tools along the way and try to like find the right one for like the problem that I'm facing at the moment, and then like build my toolbox. The only way how this really works is to explore, to like try new tools, to essentially do R&D. If you are lucky, sometimes it happens to like do that for clients, like when I did like the Jinto specimen for like Dynamo a couple of years back. Like they were like just explore, do tests, and like we see where this goes. And this is like, of course, amazing if that happens, but that often doesn't. So my advice to everyone would be to do self-initiated R&D. So give yourself projects, give yourself problems to solve, like this, literally. Like I'm like, how can I make shower drain ladders? How can I make like, how can I distort a ladder into 3D space? And then like even like what I had in mind in the beginning was what happens on the, what's there on the left. And then I was like super unhappy with the result because it looked so much better in my mind than it looked at the end. But you can keep pushing it, and then eventually you arrive at a result that might be interesting to you. I also think this is very open-ended. So I had phases where I just kept playing on the same idea over months or even years, and then eventually they become like a starting point for a project when it becomes relevant. Like this one here, like playing with like a Mondrian shader, working on this project that like a post-production studio, like cutting and moving things in space, where this like came in handy as like a shader solution that mimics this like type treatment. Here, for example, looking into like how to animate Yayoi Kusama and then like pushing it further into letters and becoming like blood cells, or eventually leading to a poster. And a lot of like the early type tests were like weird, and I don't know, I had like only a few letters and it only like worked for this like one purpose, but eventually like the one in the middle became a typeface that I ended up like fully developing and so on. So like these tests lead to actual projects. All right. 2 more blocks coming. So if you reach the limitations in conventional software, so let's say I can't find the tool to solve this, then maybe I need to do my own tools. I try to break this up into like some smaller like buckets of like when I do my own tools, and it's a bit all over the place. It's like, let's say I do tools for myself, sometimes for motion. Let's say I want to do an animation that is not so straightforward to do like with conventional software. Like I don't really know how to do this in After Effects. Variable fonts are not like greatly supported in a lot of software, so maybe I have to write my own. It gets more obvious here. Like, yeah, if you have a more complex layout, more complex animation, a lot of software like not really suitable for that, need to write my own. Testing, what I mean by testing is like if I make a typeface that splits top and bottom, it's not like that clear how I would like actually use it. So maybe I need to like make my own like slider construct. Maybe you want to like make a plugin how to like test typefaces on the web, or maybe you want to like even like automate the process of the type design itself. Like let's say I make this like typeface. Of course I can like go in each letter and like cut it up manually and stretch it. Like this is the overview. It's like a static, like each letter has like 3 versions that randomly get mixed together. But in a way to arrive there, it's like I want to write a little script that cuts it up. At least even if it's like super rough in the beginning, I can still like clean it up and refine it and get it to the point where I actually want it. But that script still saves me a lot of time to like just like push that initial idea to like, yeah, to like test to see how it looks, or like to like get this like early prototype. I also think a typeface itself can be a tool. What I mean by that is like I once wanted to create this like ASCII art animation, but like with variable fonts. And I mean, years later, I managed to do like this version, which that's kind of what I had in mind in the beginning. But my first approach was like, okay, I don't know how to code this. What if I just make a typeface that, even though it's not monospaced, that doesn't change its layout, and then I can use like time displacement maps, things like that to like make the animation work. So I made the typeface to make the animation. So I used the typeface as a tool to create like what I wanted to create, to do things like this. All right, tools for a client are slightly different, because if I'm making something like here, like this is more recent project, like we made like a flexible visual identity for like this company called like Brand AI, and we made multiple tools. So one tool was this one here. It's like a WebGL tool that's like integrated into their website, that's like created in order to properly interact with it. And then also used to create animations. But then the other tool is like actually like handed over for them to like create assets, create illustrations, create like animations, like this like illustrative, like things that like live on their website or like on merch or other things. The difference, like why I point this out, is like if I create something for a client, I want to use the limitations that brought me actually to like create my own software. I use those limitations as an advantage. So if I run into the issue that like my tools can't do what I want to do, that's a problem. If my client runs into the limitations that they cannot make it look different than what it's supposed to look, then that's good for me, because essentially it is replacing the brand manual. I'm enforcing limitations and restrictions into the tool to make everything look like the brand guidelines, to make everything look consistent. The tools that I create and that I hand over to a client are like intentionally limiting, and they're like restricting for the client to like be within those boundaries. But then I don't need to like set any rules. I don't need to set any guidelines, because all those guidelines are baked in, if that makes sense. And then like you have this like visual consistency, like creating like all the assets always look the same. You can be obviously flexible with it. You can like draw whatever with it, use it on like merchandise or as like video filters and so on, but it's always gonna provide this like visual consistency. And in the opposite, if I'm doing a tool for the public, I don't want to be too limiting. I don't want, like, if I want people to like create like typefaces, for example, then I don't want them to like all the typefaces to look exactly the same. I want them to be as flexible as like free as much. I want to give them as much freedom as I can. This is a bit more complicated. If you want to like read up on this, this is called average.26a1.xyz. There's a whole essay. I could probably do like a whole lecture just on this. So if you're curious to hear more about this, this is where you find more information. But yeah, now I'm at my last block. So we came from tools to processes to a toolbox to self-made tools, DIY tools, and now we're at like tools 2.0. I mean, you can kind of guess it, but when I was still writing my thesis, it was like from a time span from like March to July, I was creating like over 100 typefaces and like type design sketches. Some were like super expressive, others were less, or like more conservative. But the only way this was possible was through the help of automation. Kind of the same what I just said, like this is also blowing the framework of this presentation. So if you want to like read more into this, there's like breaking up the like type design process into like smaller automatable steps. If you want to read up on that, that's on wenzeldaniel.com/ATD. Whole essay about that. But essentially, let's talk briefly about automation. Automation is the transformation of a work process into an automatic process flow. So going from the screwdriver to the drill, that's what we want. And nowadays, like usually when people refer to automation, they talk about computerization, and computerization is acceleration. If you just compare like the like numbers of like a modern transistor and the human brain, then you arrive at the conclusion that like 1 week of computer simulation equals 20,000 years of human processing. It is a lot faster. The reason why we do this, it's like tasks are left to a machine in order to make better use of the human potential. And what I mean by that is when I started to work in graphic design, I was like, my work looked like this. I was doing things like Photoshop cutout. That means like you zoom in very closely and set every anchor point by hand to like cut out a shoe for a magazine. I would argue that this is not the best use of the human potential. And for this, gladly, like now we have AI. If we talk about AI in our industry, I think there is a massive like fear, like this conversation of like this is taking our jobs, this is going to make us irrelevant. So I think it's important to talk about these things and it's important to address. I like to refer to this study from like the Oxford University 2013. It's the future of employment, and it's rating the computerization probability of 702 jobs. It ranks art direction at a lower probability than graphic design. And my conclusion here is like art direction is closer connected to concept and decision making, while graphic design is closer connected to execution, so craftsmanship. That means the idea is more important than the craft. And that's okay, because the good thing, if we talk about AI, is intelligence is not the same as creativity. So looking 2015, this is style transfer. AI is really good in looking at a photo of Tübingen and making a Van Gogh version of it. But I wouldn't say that's creative, because if it would be, then like these art forgery factories, which this is a real photo, this exists, would house the most creative people of our time right now. Now, fast forward 2023, stable diffusion, things get a bit more unclear. Like you get a lot of this like here it says like glad it's not AI. The lines get a bit blurry. Like people don't really like understand what is AI and what not. But I would even argue, do you have to? Like, does it really matter if this is done by AI or not? If it only lives online, if it's not like if it's a digital artwork, I wouldn't question how you got to the result, because I'm also not going into a museum and say I could paint like Ellsworth Kelly or Duchamp. What is this doing here? I can also just go to IKEA and buy a urinal. To me, that's the same argument. It's like, it doesn't really matter how fast the process was. It doesn't really matter if it was like one click of a button, if you only had to like write one sentence. If it was a good idea and if it was like creative and it was your idea, then this is what matters. And the process, how you got to your result, is irrelevant. So if the idea matters, it is important to talk where you get your inspirations. Because there's this like spiral of like design leading to design inspiration, leading to design inspiration. And that's an issue, because if you look at what AI is really, really good at, it can look at faces and create faces. It can also look at letters and create letters. It can look at typefaces and create typefaces. But what it's not doing on its own, it's like getting inspired by things like science or like music, instruments, objects. And to me, that's the advantage, that's the human advantage, is to create something objectively wrong as subjectively good. So I would advise to like break out of this spiral of like design leading to design inspiration and get your inspiration somewhere else, like food, architecture, science, art, nature. Yeah, walking through Barcelona, it's very inspiring to see like Gaudí getting all his like nature inspirations and so on. That might be very unique and individual for each and every one of us. And like, this is me. But that is good, because we're all different, we're all individuals. If we all get inspirations from the things that make us who we are, then all our work looks different, and that's what we want. And then you can do things like this, right? Like get a science-inspired letter, or like a brass instrument-inspired like A poster. And that doesn't at all mean to say no to AI. That means that you're like using AI in like a creative way. Like here, I used AI to sketch. I used a lot of like mid-journeys to like do prototyping, and then eventually like I moved on to like cinema with it. But here I can really advise to like use ChatGPT for coding. It is great. I had the pleasure to have like coded before there was AI, so I think there's like this issue that like trying to like learn code, if you like get too stuck in AI, is like getting like somewhat tricky. But if you have like a general understanding of code, using AI, it's like really gonna like speed up your process and gonna help like getting like quicker to the solutions that you are aiming for. What it comes down to is assistive AI. So instead of autonomous, which is I think what everybody is like scared of, it's more assistive, and it's nothing different than what we've been talking about so far. It's like talking about tools, it's just more intelligent tools. And I would conclude with this.
But I like to use the word affected, not replaced, because I think if done right, it's not going to be AI replacing lawyers. It's going to be lawyers working with AI replacing lawyers who don't work with AI.
That's it.
Thank you, Daniel. Who has a question for Daniel?
Daniel, do you need to do everybody who wants to develop themselves in this field need to know math?
Wait, what was the question?
Sorry, yeah. Do you need to know math to create such visuals, create shaders and whatsoever?
Yeah, I mean, coding is a lot of math. I get that. I get that from many students. Like when I'm teaching at Pratt, it's like a very like code forward class, and people like trying to get started in creative coding are usually surprised how much math it is. It is all math, but math can be fun.
Hi. I was wondering, kind of more specifically, when you're working in a team, more for client work, your role in that, kind of when you think you're shifting more into like a design role, when you feel more like an engineer, how that works and where you sit in that when you're working with other people.
I see myself like in most projects nowadays. I'm like in an art direction role, like overseeing projects, and the way it works, or like it works best to me often is like doing things like prototyping, like prototype sketches. I I'm always hands-on. I don't think I can like work and just stand there and like say do this and that. So like it's very like hands-on, doing sketches, like bringing putting out ideas, and then working with a team. You have like people that like push these ideas further, develop those, execute those within like larger settings. If I'm doing like a coding prototype, we can then like move on working with a developer that implements it, that like expands it into like a larger web context.
More questions? Hi. Normally they are not that shy, Daniel.
Daniel. So I guess I'm wondering, like, you sort of answered half of this question, I think, already during your presentation, but so when you're using, like, let's say Illustrator to develop sort of a unique typeface, at what point, and I guess like through your own development of tools, it sort of assists you, and sort of, I guess, like the automation of these typefaces is also like kind of creating your authorship, or like that is sort of your authorship, but like to what extent is the typeface still under the sort of authorship of a software such as like AI? And like, does that sort of matter in your sort of field of work? Yeah, does that kind of make sense?
Yeah. So authorship in AI is like a super complicated question. That's why I'm not using like AI within like typefaces that I'm like distributing, because it is a very like, I mean, that they just figured that out at the moment, kind of like there's like new laws coming into place and so on. Generally, I mean, if you work in Illustrator or like any other software, like it's your work. Like I'm the author. If I use Illustrator or not, it's like not that Adobe is the author. Otherwise, am I wrong? Like, correct me if I'm wrong. I think it depends, right? Like if I'm using AI to write code, I would guess that I'm the author. If I train AI on splines of existing typefaces, then it becomes like a gray area, because like you could argue that like that AI is not interpolating out of existing stuff. It is creating new typefaces. It is learning the same as like a human would learn, right? There is like many designers out there that just like overlap Helvetica and Arial and Univer and draw their own typeface with like see-through paper and say like, this is my typeface, right? So it's a tricky argument, but I'm like, how is like this is allowed, and then using AI is like technically not allowed, but it's like one thing is like law, ethic. It's a broader conversation that we could have here. I hope this answers somewhat of the question.
No, definitely. Thank you. Thank you.
More questions? Thank you very much, Daniel. Okay, we have been faster than expected, so maybe then we do this 5 to 10 minutes break before we start with the next lecture. Okay, thank you.